Welcome to another edition of the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I continue with my interview with colorist, inker, letterer, penciler, and writer Ron Kasman. Based in Ontario, Ron's been called the unsung genius of Canadian comics, and he's been recognized for his work on Captain Canuck, Negative Burn, and the Tower of Comic Book Freak series. In part 2 of this interview, Ron talks about the current version of Captain Canuck, provides some insight into the early days of Canadian comic books, and his efforts to promote the Tower of Comic Book Freaks, along with a hint of a potential movie, so we'll see. Before I go further, I encourage you to like this podcast on iTunes and definitely check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. Like it on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can discover a lot more information about Canadian comic book creators and supporters. And now, part 2 of my chat with Ron Kasman.
Yeah, I have read some of it. Some of the artists, like Dave Ross, it's hard to beat his work. So I am impressed by some of the stuff that's coming out. There's a lot of it coming out. Good for Richard, good for the people that are doing it. As for the stories, it's often a matter of personal taste. They certainly have good people writing them and good people drawing them. But beyond that, you've got to decide if you like that sort of thing, which is true for any literary medium. Just because something's good doesn't mean people are going to like it. So I hope the circulation continues to do well, and it seems to be the cornerstone of the chapter house, and deservedly so. Hope they all do well with it. Canada, we didn't even have any music until the mid-'60s. At that time, the government decided that 1 out of 3 songs played on a radio station in Canada would be a Canadian song, and they had a definition of what Canadian meant. When they did that, a lot of people weren't happy about it at all. There's a bit of a chicken and egg here. On the one hand, there was no Canadian industry, but on the other hand, nobody wanted to play this stuff. So the Canadian industry wasn't the thing. We had Gordon Lightfoot and Anne Marie. So suddenly, you were constantly hearing Gordon Lightfoot and Anne Marie. Right now, it's probably hard for a person to imagine a world with no Canadian music. There's so much good stuff. But there wasn't any then, except for Gordon Lightfoot and Anne Marie. And I think we considered them good because they were being played in the United States. To a lot of Canadians, it wasn't good until it was played in the United States. And there's still a lot of that. With comic books, the circulation of a comic was so low that people were scared to publish them for the Canadian newsstand. At the time, and I'm talking mid-'60s when I was reading this stuff, Canadian comics were American comics were being published for about 250,000 people. The average circulation would be about 250,000. That's just not going to happen in Canada. When you've got 250,000 people reading something, you can invest a lot of money in it. You can pay your artists well and have work done by the best artists in America who draw comics. We had no parallel. And if you look at Richard came out with Captain Canuck, and I could get it off by year, but I think it was in '76. He drew the first 3, I believe, by himself. And Richard wasn't quite ready for it either, but he struck a nerve. The art might have been naive, but and I'd say the writing was naive too. But his character was uniquely Canadian, and I think that's what did it. After 3 issues, George Freeman, by and large, took over, and he was not a naive artist. He was really good. I don't know what their business arrangement was, but I think it had become such a hit that I can't speak for George, and I've only spoken to George a couple times in my whole life. But I think it had become such a hit, he probably considered it quite an honor. And Jean-Claude Saint-Aubin came out all the way from Quebec. He was also a very, very good artist. Actually, I think just a little bit before Richard, Jim Whaley started doing Orb magazine in Toronto. And I was associated with Orb, and that Jim had some of my stuff, but it also died a sudden death. I think there were 6 issues. There might have been 7. A lot of the artists were very, very young, but very, very talented. So that's what was going on at the time. That was about it. During the war years, of course, there was an embargo on paper. So in the 1940s, there was a comic industry that Ivan knows the exact number, and so does Steve Lipson. But my understanding is there were 600 or 700 comics printed at that time, and then it ended suddenly. Then there was nothing at all until, I guess I've heard it called Canada's Bronze Age, Orb and Captain Canuck. Captain Canuck, Richard did a good job pursuing business interests, and he kept it going for about a dozen issues, but it faded and then had various incarnations over the years. Meanwhile, the store system came up, where a city the size of Toronto could have 30 comic book stores, and there were about a dozen distributors. So people realized that for a couple of $1,000s, go and ask Mom and Dad, I got a great idea. It'll take a couple $1,000s to get it rolling, but this is how Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started. And some guys made a lot of money at that point in the mid-'80s. Other guys went bust trying to do it right. But a lot of money changed hands. Kids were buying everything. And it was, again, that geometric progression that I talk about, where one day you've got a handful of guys doing it, and then just a few months later you've got double the amount, and it doubles again and continues to do so until the comic stores can't fit the books on the stands anymore. And then they've got to start making decisions. The distributors can't take them anymore, and they've got to start refusing books. So while there was a time in the mid-'80s where anybody, and I mean anybody, who got off a block quickly and got the books out at the right time could make a lot of money. That changed awfully fast. I don't know how long that boom lasted, but the boom became a bust. A lot of people who were part of the boom caught the bug, and though there was a bust, people, you might say, doubled down on it. They started publishing color books, and the color books went head-to-head with Marvel. You got all kinds of companies. Some of the companies had big money backing behind them. Others were just guys who managed to scrounge a few bucks together. And people made significant personal money, lost significant personal money. It was an interesting time to watch it. And then we went into a bust situation again. What I see now is as soon as very ultra small press, as soon as you could go down the street or go to lulu.com and get your comic book printed for very little money, people started up with it again. And as I mentioned, distribution is the problem people are looking at now. I spoke to my publisher today and yesterday, and he was saying that the publisher, by the way, has been in business for 25 years. It's called Caliber Entertainment now, and I'm pretty sure I know why they changed it to entertainment. They found that they were making money not just off the sales of the book, but off the sales of subsidiaries. So I've got a T-shirt coming out, and I was joking to my wife that the true measure of a talent is if there's a T-shirt based on this work, and now I've got a T-shirt. So yeah, I got a T-shirt. So I got today. He sent me the image that will be on the front of the T-shirt. It's kind of neat. They'll be selling for $25. I can't wait to see them. But I have seen the image, and I'll put the image up on the internet very soon. But what he was saying to me was the people who buy comics, not surprisingly, buy primarily Marvel and DC. The stores, if they don't park their money with Marvel and DC, are going to Dark Horse and IDW. And for him, every copy sold is a battle. So I went through with him what I've done over the last, January, I think it came out January 12th, what I've been doing since January 12th to try to promote the book. So my book is actually selling much better than the average books at Caliber, and it got up to number 16 in its category on Amazon. So I think it's great. I'm ecstatic. I mean, it's selling something. People are actually buying this, and it's still selling. So that's what he was saying to me. He said that most books have died after a month or two. Yours is still moving from January 12th. So while that may be the case, the amount of believe it, anybody can say this, and everybody does. I don't expect everybody to believe me on this, but I don't care how many it sells. I really don't. The number of sales is going to be insignificant as a reflection of money earned, unless it snowballs, unless it hits the New York Times bestseller list, unless somebody decides that a movie should be made out of this. I'll be making chump change. And I fully understand this. My publisher at one point said that we make twice the money when it sells on Amazon, so encourage people to buy it on Amazon rather than in a comic store. Believe me, I'm not going to trade my principles for a few bucks on Amazon. If somebody wants it, and again, some people have seen me do this. Before someone's going to spend $25 on my book, I say to them, "You sure you want to spend $25 on this? You can get it in the library." In fact, I said that to one person today. Somebody said, "How do I get this?" And I said, "Well, there are three ways. You can either download it, you can buy it on Amazon, or at a comic book store. You can buy a paper copy, or you can borrow it in a library. Because the money I actually make on this is so insignificant in my life that I just want people to read it. And I think if they read it, whatever way they read it, they'll believe what I believe, that it is a good story, and it's worth saying to someone, "I just read a great story." And I've had three reviews from women. All the reviews started, "I didn't expect to like the book, but the book is often being sold as a period piece, and it is about the time the history of comics is woven into it. So that's one attraction. But it's also a romance story, and it's a coming of age story. The story more when I wrote it, I was thinking of Seth Rogen geek films. And John, I don't know if you're a geek. I am. I'm okay. Okay. I don't know if you're a nerd or geek, whatever. I know there's a difference in the two. I probably define as both, and I'm long finished with that bothering me. I don't say I wallow in it. I know when it's hanging around. I know that there are times you just shouldn't act that way, and you should buck up, young man, and start acting like a reasonable human being. But I can't always act like a reasonable human being. It's not in me. So when I go and see those Seth Rogen films and all those films that are made about the 40-year-old, you know the ones like 40-year-old Virgin and Superbad, I watch those movies and I say, they're my brothers. So I wrote this as a Seth Rogen type story. And in one of the books, actually it's not in a book, I'm sorry. In one of the downloads, I put extra stuff in the downloads because it's not paper. You can put as much as you want. I put in an open letter to Seth Rogen. and I'm absolutely sure the chances of him seeing that are 1 in 10,000. It's not an old letter to Seth Rogen. It's a comical letter that I just sent out. That's all it is. But it's saying that this is the sort of thing that you did. This is how you got going with this geek image. So it's a geek story. And there are an awful lot of people that can identify with that geek stuff. I'm not the only one walking around saying, yeah, I'm a geek. I've tried to do something about it, and I can hold it back for short periods of time, but only for short periods of time. Yeah, there's a world of us. This is part of my immediate corner. I'm doing a store signing in early October, and I'll make note of that on the internet. I'm going to a convention in about 2 weeks. I've got it. Oh, I got a T-shirt coming out. I told you that, and I'm sure we're stuck for time right now. I am not. You'll be the first person I've said this to publicly. I haven't even put it up on my site. The publisher's trying to sell the thing as a movie, and they've sold one movie that's actually been produced, and I'm sure you're aware of it. The Crow with Brendan Lee. That's okay. Yeah. It's based on a Caliber production. So these guys they've optioned over 40 films, but they generally don't go beyond the option stage. Only two, The Crow in both cases, The Crow and a sequel, have gone beyond the option stage. So if I can actually get it as an option, I'll consider it to be an enormous success, and they're trying to get the thing out as an option. He said it's with a producer, literally a producer. And he said, and this was in an email, he said, they work very slowly. You know, it's like watching a glacier move, waiting for these guys. I don't expect that. I don't think it's ridiculous to hope that it will be optioned. To expect that it will be optioned is another story. The time will come when this thing will fold. I think the best of the other 5 stories that I wrote, I didn't mention it, but I wrote one story about internet dating. And I don't think this has been deeply explored in graphic novels. So I might do something on that. But on the other hand, I have a lot of interests, and nothing says I have to continue drawing graphic novels. I might not. We'll see.
Good stuff. Okay, Ron, well, thank you very much for your time. This has been a wonderful interview, and I'm sure we'll be able to chat again real soon.
Thanks, John. I really enjoyed talking to you. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Thanks to Ron for talking with me. It was a great chat, and hopefully you found something interesting in it too. You can find Ron's The Tower of Comic Book Freaks online at Amazon.ca and Chapters Indigo. Thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to subscribe, like, and comment on the podcast, so please send your feedback to truenorthcountrycomics@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now.